Hey guys, Zueljin here. Welcome back to my kitchen. I thought I would do some spaghetti for y'all today because my wife wants spaghetti and, well, why not film it, right? So I do my spaghetti not really traditional Italian style, not really Cajun style. I don't know what my style is, Zueljin style, I guess. But I do a few things. So when I used to work for an Italian restaurant called Tremonti over at a casino in Kinder, Louisiana, and my boss was an executive chef, and he did a really good job with a bolognese recipe. And one of the things that he said that most people neglect in their sauces is that they don't use mixed meats. In other words, they just use like ground beef, for instance. And for a sauce like marinara, which most people don't take the time to make sauce from scratch, I kind of do, not from scratch, but very, very close. I don't use a manufactured store-bought sauce in a jar is what I'm trying to say, but I don't actually simmer down the tomatoes until, pureed tomatoes and stuff. So I use ground beef and ground pork. So I'm gonna use a little bit over a pound of ground pork only because that was the size they had at the store. It's not an exact science. And I'm gonna use a little bit over a pound of ground beef. The pork is gonna be a little bit more than the beef, but I don't know. Maybe we'll turn one into a meatball. So along with the beef and the pork, that's gonna be in the meat sauce actually. And you can do this, you can make them into meatballs if you want. I preferably like meat sauce, and so does my wife, so it's just easier to eat like that in my opinion. I use a combination of some mixed seasonings that I get that McCormick makes. I'm a big fan of McCormick. Most of their stuff is really, really good. So I use a packet of Italian mushroom spaghetti seasoning and a pack of thick and zesty spaghetti seasoning. Now, I can tell you that if you don't have this available, you can probably order it online, though, honestly, even internationally. But most people have spaghetti mixes or taco seasoning mixes or whatever. What this contains mostly is sugar, salt, onion, corn, what? I don't know. Basil, oregano, paprika, milk, garlic, mushroom, and some beef powder and blue cheese powder, whatever that is. Anyway, so these are the two sauce packets I use. One has a little bit of mushroom flavoring, and one is just labeled thick and zesty. This is supposed to act like a thickener because the sauce mix that I use has a bunch of tomato sauce in it. So, all right. Next is my secret ingredient, what nobody in my family uses really, but it's wonderful. I used to use whole tomatoes and just cut them up and season them. And now, most of the time what I notice is those things get obliterated like in the sauce unless I add them late. And I like them to be able to absorb the flavor. And this does a really good job. This is Hunt's stewed tomatoes. It doesn't have to be Hunt's, but I like the premium canned goods for stuff like this. It works out really well. In addition to that, I use 1 can of tomato sauce, one regular, what size is this? 8-ounce can of tomato sauce per seasoning packet, and one of them I have a roasted garlic flavor here, and one of them I have basil, garlic, and oregano, and that's just the flavors are infused in it, and it makes it pretty good. In addition to that, I make my spaghetti so chunky you can eat it with a fork without having noodles in it. And what I do is I cut 2 whole bell peppers in, I cut a whole head of parsley, and I use some sliced mushrooms as well. In addition to that, the only thing that I haven't told you about yet is minced garlic and, of course, a yellow onion. So naturally, we're gonna cut the yellow onion. And the reason that I use yellow onions, I don't think I talked about it last video, but I like the flavor mostly. The sweet onions do a really, really good job adding anything but actual sweetness. I talked with a few friends of mine recently and said how much I despise an actual sweet flavor in anything that's not like pastries and stuff. Like, I don't like sweet meats or proteins or poultry or anything like that. It's, I don't know, my palate just doesn't agree with it. I don't like anything. So any like brown sugar or maple or anything like that, even in barbecue sauce, kills me. You could be pretty generous with the size of the slicing on this one. For onions, you want to give it some texture. You want the spaghetti to be quite chunky, so that's probably good right there. A few slices on each one. Next, we're gonna cut a couple of bell peppers. The grocery store that I shopped at for these specific ingredients didn't have the best looking bell peppers, but I think I got the best two out of the bunch. I've never really learned how to properly cut bell peppers, but this is the way I do them. I typically just cut out the middle so that it spots right out, and then you can just easily get the stuff out that you don't need, like so, like the seeds and stuff. And I usually just run the inside of water just so I can get the last few seeds out. And these I cut really, really large actually. I usually just cut them probably about an inch or a few centimeters for you European paps. Yeah, I don't know if you could see. I wish I could show it to you like that. Yeah, a little bit bigger than my thumb. So now that we have all of the vegetables cut up, you might as well just start heating up your pot and throwing your meat in. I don't really mix this together beforehand. I just kind of put it in the pot and season it, and then I stir it up. It helps me kind of measure out how much seasoning to actually use. So before it gets too loud, you see it's coating my pot, the bottom of the pot, at about maybe an inch or two deep, and I'll just cover it with salt generously. And I use black pepper. You could use any kind of pepper, but I like the flavor of black pepper. My colon's probably gonna fall out when I get a little bit older, but that's okay. Who needs a colon? It's not worth shit. And we're just gonna wait until this browns up before we add any of the vegetables. So now that the meat's brown, I went ahead and added all of my onions and bell peppers, as well as my head of parsley I just chopped up. You're gonna mix this in really, really good until it's even and consistent. Then you can add your garlic. I put about a couple cloves worth. And normally you would season your vegetables as you go, but for this case, we've already seasoned the ground beef and pork mixture. So now it's time to add the seasoning in the packaging. Just add the whole packs. Don't have to be shy. A lot of it's paprika, onion powder, and garlic powder anyway. You want to add a little bit of water so that it'll help everything mix up. And you'll see that whether it's too thick or too thin, typically it'll take quite a bit of water. You don't want it soupy, you want it like a paste, so you don't want to overwater. You can always take some out by letting it boil hard without a cover on the pot. Make sure to mix this in until it's very, very, very consistent and even. And you're gonna let this simmer for about a half hour to 45 minutes before adding the mushrooms. Then you can cook the mushrooms down for about 15 minutes until they're soft. And you can serve it over spaghetti noodles. Now that the heat's on low, fix yourself a glass of wine or grape juice if you're not old enough. Put on some Frank Sinatra and chill out. So I just set my spaghetti down in my water, so it's gonna start boiling in a few moments. And while I'm waiting, I wanna just take a moment to show you guys how I degrease the spaghetti. Now, anytime you use ground beef in anything, it's going to make grease. And ground pork as well, but ground beef mostly. Depending on how lean you get it, most of the time if you use 80-20, there'll be a substantial amount of this. But what you'll do is you'll notice that there's clear spots. It's going to be very hard for you to see here, but there's clear spots on top of the spaghetti, and when you see that, you just have to skim over them just to pull a little bit of grease off. I already got most of it off, but it's just an example to show you. You'll be able to see where it's at as you cook it. Also, in order to figure out how thick the spaghetti should be, typically when you start getting towards the end of the cooking process, it'll want to start sticking to the bottom of the pot, even on a low heat. I have mine on 2 out of 10.
But I use this flat-edged spoon, and it's great for scraping the bottom of the pot. You just want to do this pretty regularly just to make sure nothing's sticking. If your spaghetti's loose enough, you probably won't have this problem at all, and if it's too thick, it'll probably do it too much. A good way to gauge, or the way that I've always used to gauge how thick the spaghetti should be, is if I put a spoon down, if it floats, the weight of the spoon head just about floats here, you can see, and it's not going anywhere. It's taking on water a little bit, eventually it'll sink, but you can tell that the spaghetti is pretty damn thick like this. Alright you guys, the mushrooms are tender, the bell peppers are soft, and the onions are almost dissolved. And the pasta is just about ready to boil. I want to show you one last trick that I do. Might get a little steamy here. You want to dump your pasta. Now, pasta will stick together like crazy if you don't do anything with it. So I do a couple things with it. I add olive oil. Not much. You don't want it greasy, but you want to be able to toss it right. And you want it to run through with cold water. I know you think cold. Like, don't get me wrong, you can serve this with the spaghetti right now, but my family's not here yet because I'm recording video, so I want to make sure to eat with them. So I'm just going to go ahead and spray it down with cool water and this olive oil, and when it's cool enough, you can actually toss it with your hands just to make sure. And the great thing about doing this is that your pasta, even though you refrigerate it after you cook it, it'll stay separated. The noodles won't stick and clump together. So you'll have a really, really good spaghetti experience even with leftovers. Alright guys, and there you have it. A nice little layered bed of sauce with some spaghetti noodles on top. Spaghetti a la Zueljin. I happen to be out, but if you really want to spice it up, add a little bit of Parmesan or Romano cheese on top. It's so good, man. Let's see how well I got the seasoning. Make sure to get a little bit of tomato, onion, bell pepper, all in one bite. Nailed it. All the vegetables are soft. All the flavors are married together. Really garlicky. Not too spicy. Just salty enough. Everything is tender. Unbelievable. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give me some dap on that like button to show your support. And you can subscribe to the channel for more daily videos. Thanks so much for watching. As always, this is Zueljin signing off. And we'll see you next time.